pastor, fellow Toastmasters. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you tonight. It is always an honor. It was my voice that was cracking, trying to maintain my composure, despite the fact that the man I was talking to was dying. He stayed calm, cool, and collected. I'd like to share with you tonight a 10-minute conversation with a stranger that changed my life. This story, unlike most, started rather oddly. The local cemetery had been bought out by a major corporation, and one of the ways that they decided to market their wares was through telemarketing. Those of you who hang up on the guy selling the newspaper, be aware, it could be worse. I was hired on as the third telemarketer and did pretty well. Despite being the youngest and the least experienced, I excelled. I became the top guy and was doing well, kicking butt and taking names, as I like to say, until that night. I will never forget it as long as I live. It was about an hour before my shift was about to end. I was in the room with the phones by myself. Picked the phone, dialed the number. A woman answered. I went through my spiel, and instantly the phone went silent. Hello? Hello? I knew she hadn't hung up because I could hear the TV in the background. My first thought was, maybe she's trying to mess with me. Maybe she's trying to tie up my line so that I can't interrupt anyone's dinner hour ever again for the rest of the night. But I pressed the phone to my ear and I listened. I heard her talking in the distance as if she was trying to get someone to answer the phone. So I waited to find out what would happen. And sure enough, her husband picked up the phone. I went through my spiel again, and he said, "That's great. We already have our funeral arranged with you guys." I then went into my secondary spiel. You see, it wasn't my job to sell anything over the phone. It was my job to set up appointments for the salesman to go in and talk to you about prearranging your funeral. As soon as I told him that it was my job to confirm everything that he had and do sort of a follow-up appointment, a courtesy call, the phone went silent again. I listened again. I knew that he hadn't hung up on me, so I waited again to find out. He comes back a few minutes later, calm, cool, and collected, offers apologies. He says, "I'm sorry, I have to apologize for my wife. She has a hard time handling all of this. You see, I'm dying. I only have about 4 to 6 months left. So we definitely want to make sure that everything is in order." A flurry of emotion just flooded me. Tears started welling up as I tried to maintain my composure to get through this phone call. I said, "I'm sorry to hear about that." He began to rattle off a number of a plot where he knew that he was going to be married and his wife next to him. I gathered my composure and let him know that I didn't have that information. It was my job to set up an appointment, to follow up, and that the salesman would confirm everything with you and make sure that absolutely everything was in order. I just needed to get a name, an address, and a phone number so that we could make sure that the appointment went through. As he gave his name, I recognized it. He was a senior. His name sounded just like someone I went to school with. Sure enough, I went to school with his son. To sort of lighten up the conversation, I asked about his son, how he was doing. Told him, tell Adam, I said hi. I wrapped up the appointment. I hung up the phone. My instant thought was, I have to keep going. I have to pick up the phone, keep going, maintain my composure, make another phone call, get through the night. The first ring. It's getting a lot tougher. The second ring. The conversation running through my head, thinking about this man who was dying. By the third ring, I had to hang up the phone. Tears were streaming down my face. I got up, took a break, got a drink of water, tried to maintain my composure and get back on the phone. I picked it up again. My hand was shaking. I couldn't do it. I left early that night. 3 days later, I left that job. I could not do it. I couldn't take the thought of answering, picking up the phone and talking to someone who was dying again. It shook me to the very core. And I'd like to tell you that this story ended happily and miraculously. He's a cancer survivor or something like that. It's not. I recently spoke with his son on Facebook to ask permission to share the story with you tonight. He kindly gave it, and I asked, just so that I knew. Sure enough, about 4 months after we spoke, he died. But I've taken away a few things from that conversation that have molded the way that I live my life. The first is don't be afraid. That man was dying. He not only knew that he was dying, which we really all know, but he knew when. And he pressed on, took care of his family, and lived his life. The second is sort of a philosophy that I've adopted. I call it 6 months to life. This guy only had 4. But I want to live my life so that if I die 6 months from now, I will have lived a full life. But I don't want to live recklessly because I may live a full life. So I want to make sure that all of the relationships that I have know that I love them. And all the things that I want to do, I'm doing. And sort of tying in with that, I learned that 10 minutes can change your life. And I urge you to take 10 minutes in the next day or so and take those things that you've been living afraid of doing and do them. And take 10 minutes to call that broken relationship and mend it. And if you remember nothing from this, remember this one wish for your life, and that is that you live it.